So let's go through a little journey in time. Here is the exact same prompt. Imagine a treehouse castle. I didn't say anything about the style, the colors, the composition, the lighting, nothing, just treehouse castle. Every Midjourney model has some basically pre-baked style preferences. Each model has its own bias or tendencies towards a particular style based on how the model was trained. And with V1, you can see that our treehouse castle is not at all photorealistic. It's not very 3D even. It's kind of like collage looking, flat. The lighting is not very interesting or dynamic, but of course this is V1. So here's the same prompt run with V2, treehouse castle. The lighting is a bit more dynamic. Things look slightly more 3D, but not photographic at all. If we compare them, the resolution maybe is a little bit better, not quite as pixelated, but still not great. Then we move to V3. Kind of in the same vein, it's better, but it's sort of pixel art looking by default. It's more colorful, but not anywhere near the type of output that we get today. Then we go to V4, which was a significant improvement, where things definitely, by default, look more realistic, more 3D, maybe a bit more photographic or 3D render-ish, less flat. Let's just leave it at that, compared to V1. And then V5 is the biggest difference, the biggest jump, in my opinion, because V5 was trained basically to favor a more photographic style by default. And it actually is still the most naturally photographic model version. We can get really good photograph looking images with 5.2, but what's interesting is that V5 has a stronger tendency towards photographic looking images by default. I didn't say I wanted a photograph. I don't want a hyper realistic treehouse castle. I just said treehouse castle. V5 is the most photographic currently. If we look at 5.1, which doesn't seem like much of a difference in terms of model numbers, but if you look at the results, things are less photographic, more fantastical, more stylized, more over the top, more sort of over the top lighting. It's prettier, but less photographic looking. These look like they could be real, in my opinion, or close to real. These look like something from a video game or something from a fancy, Marvel movie or something maybe. But this doesn't mean that we can't use 5.1 or 5.2 to make really good looking photographic images. This is solely about the individual model versions baked in preferences towards one style or another. And that brings us to the most recent version and the current default as of right now in July 2023, version 5.2. So again, it's very stylized, beautiful, great lighting, dramatic, but it looks like something out of a video game, or some sort of 3D render. It doesn't quite look real. It's over the top. It's stylized. We can turn that down. We can control that as we get better with our prompts. All that I did as a control here is imagine a treehouse castle, nothing else. Now let's go back to V1. Compare that difference. A treehouse castle in V1 to a treehouse castle in V5.2. Pretty significant difference. Okay, so that's just a quick rundown of the history of the models, a little progression of how much they've improved over time, and I'm sure they will continue to get much, much better. Now, if we go to Discord, remember that you can always check on the model version that you have currently selected by using /settings, and then you can dismiss this if it bothers you to have it sticking around. So the default setting for me right now is using 5.2, and if I imagine something, let's do a field of tulips at sunset. This will use version 5.2 because that's what I have selected in my settings. But I could switch that up. If I go to /settings, I can change that version. Maybe I want to use version 5. I'm going to rerun the same prompt. So /imagine a field of tulips. Let me make sure I match the language exactly. No, field of tulips, comma, sunset. Okay, field of tulips, sunset. This is now using version 5. Because I have version 5 selected in my settings, it will stay that way until I change it. Now, that's not the only way to change the version. This is just the way that you can continuously use the same version for all of your prompts, because now everything will be V5. Or if I selected V1, everything would be V1. But we can change the version number on a prompt by prompt basis using the -- version or -- parameter. By the way, you can see that this is our 5.2, the most recent version, where things, they look beautiful, but they're still, it almost looks like an illustration. Again, over the top. If you look at the tulips here, it's not really a photograph. It looks like something that's been drawn or painted or made in, some sort of 3D tool. If we look at V5, which has a more photographic style by default, I'm not saying these look like perfect photographs, but it's more photographic than 5.2. But we can coach the model and tell it we want a photograph, or that we want an over-the-top 3D render, or that we want an anime, or whatever we want, a cartoon, an oil painting. We have full control over that. This is solely about what the model tends to prefer if you don't guide it otherwise. Okay, so back to the version parameter. Notice when I selected V5, or let's do V1. Let's go way back in time, and let's run the same prompt. So imagine, and then field of tulips, sunset. Notice what it adds to the end of my prompt. --V, and then a space 1. This prompt says I want a field of tulips at sunset using version 1. So the parameter --version, or for short --V, which is what most people use, accepts a version number after it, separated by a space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5.1, and 5.2. If you use this at any point, you can change the version used within a prompt, and it won't impact future prompts. It's only for that one prompt. So if you look at my slides, that's exactly what I did. Imagine a treehouse castle --V5 using model version 5, --V4 use version 4, and so on, --V1. So you can do this if you want to try things with different versions, see how they look, without having to go to the settings command. But if you want to consistently use the same version for some reason, you only want to use 5, you can select it here, and that will now be the default. But I'm going to go back to 5.2. It's the latest version, and it tends to work best. This is taking a while, so I'll be back when that finishes. And actually, before that, I should mention the parameter syntax is that parameters always go at the very end of a prompt. We'll learn more about parameters, but they all start with -- something. So this means that you should not start your prompt with --V1 and then your text, a Jello spaceship. Instead, it should always be your prompt text, and at the very end, any parameters like --V1. But again, there are many other parameters we'll learn. We'll talk about stylize, we'll talk about chaos, we'll talk about things like the no parameter. Any of those parameters, they start with --, they all go at the end of your prompt. The only one we've seen so far is version. And my V1 of the tulips finished up. I ran it twice because it was taking so long, but this is what it looks like. So clearly a very big difference, right? Where I'm specifying the version 1, it does not look good compared to what we got when we specified version 5 or 5.2 or 5.1. 5.2 was the default here.